Hi, welcome to Bodhi Prep. My name is Brajesh, and here we have a passage. Most of the students have difficulty reading philosophical passages. The issue with them is that they are not able to grasp the passage. So we decided that let's take a passage today and see how we can read and codify certain elements of the passage. So I have always been insistent on one thing, that while reading passages, you should focus on what you understand and not what you don't understand. So, for example, let's look at this passage. This is from one of the Aeon articles. It says that there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. That's how Albert Camus begins his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, in which he takes it on himself to question the meaning of existence and the incentives we have for staying alive. Like many before him, he was skeptical of a purely so this is what we understand. Once you read the first few sentences, you realize that this is where you understand what exactly the author has to say. So it says here, like he was like many before him, he was skeptical of a purely objective view of reality. There is a lot that doesn't make sense about life, and this lack of orientation isn't always pleasant. In fact, quite often it involves pain, confusion, and sustained difficulty. So when you read this paragraph, what you realize is that Albert Camus is the point of discussion, and his view about life is what has been mentioned in the first paragraph. And he's skeptical, he's negative about it, and he's not very positive about whether life makes sense or not. So when you codify this passage, you can say Albert Camus is the main character. His view is about life, and it is negative in perspective. So Albert Camus's view of life is negative. This is what you summarize from the first paragraph, or this is what you codify from the first paragraph. I don't use the word summary because summary becomes very long. Codification basically means you just use one or three letters to show what the passage is all about. So it says here Albert Camus' view of life is quite negative. Camus goes on to talk about all of this at length, and he eventually answers the question. At the end of the essay, he frames his conclusion into the story of Sisyphus, a character in Greek mythology who disobeyed the gods and was punished to pointlessly roll a boulder up a hill for eternity only to watch it fall right back down, forcing him to repeat the task. So many of you might find this very strange as to what is going on. But what has Camus done? He has basically taken into his essay Sisyphus, and he was a Greek god and he was punished. Okay, so you have something about Sisyphus and what his role was in Greek mythology. That's it. Don't try to take it more. It is during that return, that pause, that so the moment you have this kind of inverted commas, opening commas we call it as, the opening comma shows that this is borrowed from the essay itself. It is during that return, that pause, that Sisyphus interests me. Who is this me here? Albert Camus. I see that man doing. I see that man going back down with a heavy yet measured step toward the torment of which he will never know the end. At each of those moments when he leaves the heights and gradually sinks towards the layers of the gods, he is superior to his fate. He is stronger than his rock. One always finds one's burden again. But Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates the gods and raises rocks. He too concludes that all is well. This universe henceforth without a master seems to him neither sterile nor futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain in itself forms a world. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to. So this is what Camus writes. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. The essay ends as shockingly as it began. How is it possible for Sisyphus to be happy? Now the point is, when you read the last sentences, you realize what basically is happening in these lines. Sisyphus is carrying a rock on his shoulder, and what does it signify? See, carrying a rock on the shoulder is not the not to be taken literally. He's carrying a rock on his shoulder basically means he's having suffering in his life, and still he's going ahead. He's moving ahead in spite of that suffering. So the author says towards the end, when I say author, that means the author is quoting Albert Camus, and these quotations have come in the Myth of Sisyphus, which has been written by Albert Camus. And towards the end, he says the struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. So whatever has been described in these lines, I don't understand them much. But when I go here in these lines, I understand what the author is trying to say about Camus. So some part of the story you will not understand, but you once you understand some part of the story, it becomes very clear. So the myth of Sisyphus has been written by Camus, and he's talking very positively about suffering, in which he glorifies Sisyphus. This is what he says in this paragraph. Before we answer that, we have to first introduce the problem that Camus was trying to solve. Correct? The question is, which question before we answer that? The answer is, how is it possible for Sisyphus to be happy? Of course, it's a question. Why? Because Sisyphus is carrying a huge burden on his shoulders and he's climbing. How can you carry a burden, climb, and be happy? And the author says, before we answer that, we have to first introduce the problem that Camus was trying to solve. It is one that takes shape in different forms in every life that has ever been lived. So, this now becomes the central point of Camus's essay. The absurd condition is a product of us trying to reason with an unreasonable world. So you are trying to reason with an unreasonable world. It occurs when our rational and sensible ideas about what we want out of life collide with the cold indifference of an unsympathetic world that doesn't concern itself with anyone. So you are trying to be reasonable with whom? With someone who is unreasonable, someone who is unsympathetic. Many of us would like to work jobs that ignite our imagination every day. But instead, we are stuck doing repetitive chores so we can pay the bills and keep doing more of the same. A lot of us would like a reasonable shot at contentment and fulfillment. Our expectations aren't unreasonable, nor do they fall outside the realm of possibility. Yet, due to factors larger than any of us, we have to settle. So the author says that you are grappling. So he's repeating the same thing. If you go to the first paragraph, what is said here? That there is a lot that doesn't make sense about life. I mean, it involves pain, confusion, sustained difficulty. And again, he's repeating the same thing here, that the absurd condition is we are trying to reason with unreasonable, we are trying to face someone who is unsympathetic. Who is unsympathetic? The world outside you is unsympathetic. We are trying hard, and yet, due to factors larger than any of us, we have to settle. There are two obvious solutions. The first is to abandon our. So, what is the solution that we have in front of unsympathetic existence? The first is to abandon our reasonable expectations, and the second is to pretend that the world isn't unreasonable at all and that everything is fine. So, there are two things. Either you abandon the expectations, or you say that everything is fine, nothing bad. So, even if you're suffering, it's good. These solutions to the predicament, however, don't please Camus. Abandoning reason is what he calls philosophical suicide, and it is at odds with the actual reality. Similarly, denying the unreasonability of the world is a form of acceptance that limits our experience. So both the solutions are basically compromising solutions, the author says. So Camus is not happy with either of the solutions. One he calls philosophical suicide, and the other is basically is like accepting the limits of our experience. So what happens in this whole thing? Now, when you have read the whole thing, you realize that author is talking about Albert Camus. He's not discussing his own opinion. Albert Camus has a view of life, and that view of life is quite negative. And then he has used the character of Sisyphus, who is a Greek character, and that character and what he thinks about it has been mentioned in the third paragraph, which is quotation from the essay itself, in which Sisyphus is very happy in carrying the burden. And the author says then towards the end that similar condition is the condition of humans, that they are fighting in an unreasonable world. The world is unsympathetic, but then we have to settle. And there are two solutions for this. So when you are in a world which is unsympathetic, indifferent to you, there are two solutions. Either you abandon your expectations or you say everything is fine. And both are equally unacceptable or absurd as per Camus. So this is just what the author is saying, that Camus has a view of life. He has captured that through the idea of or through the story of Sisyphus, and his view is that life is unreasonable. It involves pain and sustained difficulty. You have two choices: either you be very happy about it, or you abandon all your expectations. Both the solutions are basically not good as per the last paragraph. That's it. So what happens when you read philosophical passages? When you read philosophical passages, a lot of it is will not be clear to you. For example, let's go to the third paragraph. Now, when you go to the third paragraph here, you feel that what you are reading here is purely a story, that someone is doing something. It's not very clear. And Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates the gods and raises rocks. He too concludes that all is well. So this is what happens. Sisyphus is struggling. So I had told you that when you read something, always focus on what you understand, not what you don't understand. Here, I don't understand much of what is happening here. But when I go to the later half of the passage, I start understanding everything. And that is what it means. Correct? So this is more important than what has come in the earlier paragraph. And this principle you have to always follow, because what you don't understand, you don't understand. You cannot have a miracle in the exam and say, now after reading it 10 times, I have understood it. No. So what you have understood, try to connect that, and the story is clear. The picture is clear. So this was apparently a very difficult philosophical RC, but the way we have read, by breaking things into bits and pieces with full concentration, we have understood the passage. This is the way you have to read philosophical passages. There is no miracle about it. You just have to focus on what you understand. What you don't understand, just kick it out.